Here are all the materials that I used. I started off pinning the inner felt piece to the fabric and sewing on the lines that I drew out already. This will achieve that flower cushiony shape and look. Adding a cut at each indent for folding the fabric after. Then adding in all the stuffing, folding the fabric down and sewing it shut. You want to make sure that all 3 sides are folded over, and you can use a pin to help hold it down. Repeat the same process of stuffing, folding, and sewing for the remaining sections. So now that the top cushion is done, I want to create the middle button. I'm layering 4 circles of felt together and wrapping them in this cloth, just sewing it so that it starts to resemble that round shape, continuously folding the fabric little bit by bit and sewing it almost in a dumpling shape, just around the outside to make sure that it has the right roundness. Then I'll attach it to the cushion with shallow stitches, not going all the way through. Next I have the fabric cut for the sides with the felt pieces from before, and just want to make sure that the decorations are secure, so I'm going to pin those down before sewing them. Since I'm sewing both the top and bottom, I'm going to use 2 needles, one on each end of the thread, and sew from both directions. To make the flower, I'm folding this square into quarters and then once more in half so it's a triangle, and then cutting a rounded shape so that I have the petals, and just measuring where it's going to go before sewing it on. And because I want details on it, I'm using some embroidery stitches to really resemble that inner pink part of the petals. So this is a detached chain stitch. Going to go under and then up, and taking that thread to wrap around the needle, pull it through, and then sew down. So this will keep the shape of the thread and keep the petal from moving. Then a couple of extra stitches just to really emphasize the shape of the design. And now I'll do the blue part, which is just a few straight stitches, and I'll just make them a little thicker to really emphasize the details. Once the flower is well secured, I'm going to take the felt pieces and measure where to put them. It's good if the design goes over a little bit so then the outer pieces will look neater. And I'm going to add these little cuts to make sure I can fold the fabric before sewing them. And folding over the fabric so that it's close to the felt before securing it with the thread. And making sure that I'm not sewing through the flower but under it or around it. I'm adding some stuffing in here before sewing that part shut, and just continuing to sew down along that line. And it's the same with the remaining panels. I'm just going to make a few cuts and fold over the fabric before securing it with the thread, making sure that 3 out of the 4 sides are sewn shut. Then add the stuffing and sew that last side. Once all the panels are measured in, then I know where to end the decorations. Then I'll just measure that last felt piece before sewing it in, making sure that the fabric is cut to fit, and then just continuing to sew around 3 of the sides before adding in the stuffing and closing it. So for the eyes, I want to make the designs, just taking some white felt and cutting some diamond shapes before sewing them to the inner eye piece, and using long stitches to secure each point. I have 2 colors, the pink and the blue. I'm going to cut these in half and then arrange them so the pink is on top before sewing the inner eye piece to them. I want to secure the entire outer part of the eye and then do some quick stitches in the back to make sure that it doesn't fall apart. For the face, I have 2 circles of fabric. One is lighter. I'm going to cut this one in half, fold it in half, and then cut a shape. Now I'll put the eyes on and sew everything to the base. And next I'll attach the eyes. and then an upside down Y for the mouth. For both of the arms and the tail, I'm going to add a lighter piece of fabric at the end before putting both pieces together. Again, the outer pieces face on the inside so that I can sew the outer part before flipping it inside out, and then adding some stuffing and sewing it shut. Now for the sides, I'm going to attach the pieces of the arch, doing that looping stitch from behind, not going all the way through, so you won't see it in the front, and then attaching the face to the arch. Next, I'll attach the tail to the arch, folding it over before sewing it so it gives it that swishing effect. The arms will also be attached to the sides of the arch and also attached to the leftover fabric of the face. Just using a looping stitch on the back side here, making sure that there won't be any holes so that all the fluff will be held on the inside. Sewing that arm to the bottom of the face, and then adding the other arm to the other side and doing the exact same thing. Then I'm going to attach the cushion to the top, just using an angled stitch to go through both pieces of fabric, usually where there already is thread from previous sewing, and just attaching that together before putting a knot underneath. I'll add some stuffing and of course some love. Then I'll attach the base piece, just using a regular straight stitch, folding where the pieces of felt have a space, and then just continue to sew.